Hi, it's Tim from PC Gamer here. I'm with Yong Woo, senior producer from Team 5 at Blizzard on Hearthstone. And we're here to talk about the Goblins versus Gnomes expansion pack, for the most part anyway. That was the big announcement here at BlizzCon. I was kind of surprised that it felt like you guys have doubled down on the RNG side of the game, when that's the biggest thing that people sort of tend to moan and complain about, that's the reason they got beat, was that lucky Ragnaros shot. And talk to me a bit about the idea behind going what feels like all in on more randomness.
You know, Ben Brode gave a really great talk yesterday at the Fireside Gathering. What's actually really interesting is if you were to go back and watch the VOD, you'll notice that he showed these two slides with word cloud, right? And he said, oh, this is stuff that people really love about Hearthstone. And then he shows the next slide, and that's like, oh, these are things that people kind of respond, perhaps more negatively towards Hearthstone. RNG is actually on both slides. So one thing is for sure, randomness creates a very intense emotional response. Sometimes it goes in your favor, and you kind of get really excited about it, and you post YouTube videos about it, and it gets on Reddit, and you tell all your friends about it for weeks to come. Like he gave the example of kind of Trump carefully navigating his way through this game, trying to maximize his chance of survival, and eventually this kind of odd chance he came out on top and he was able to win. So that kind of story is really exciting. Obviously, sometimes things don't go in your favor, and that can kind of that can create some negative emotions as well. But either way, I think it's really important to have that kind of emotional amplitude when you are engaged with a game like Hearthstone. So kind of creating that story, having that emotional amplitude, that's really important. The other aspect that Brode went into is we firmly believe that randomness introduces more skill to the game. It actually takes a lot of foresight and strategic thinking to be able to determine what the best decisions are in a world where there is uncertainty. And it's a situation that also can make players uncomfortable. But I think it's a good kind of uncomfortable. And when you kind of go to the highest level of gameplay, like we saw today for the Hearthstone World Championship, so I'm so excited for Firebat, by the way. These players have to make these really important strategic decisions without knowing 100% what the outcome is going to be. And then when the outcome happens and it's something unexpected, they need to then quickly modify their thinking and engage in intense problem solving to deal with a scenario that they couldn't have anticipated before. And to us, that's really exciting. And we're gonna continue to encourage that.
I thought it was interesting what Ben said about how if you have a game that's based purely on skill, then it encourages players to kind of memorize openings, and you can kind of get matches which then play out more predictably. But of those kind of 30 or so cards you've revealed so far, would you say they're representative of the kind of the totality of the 120 cards in terms of the amount of RNG and the style of like the number of mechs that are featured? Because it feels so heavy on mechs and randomness in the cards we've seen.
Totally. What we showed is definitely not homogeneous of of all 120 cards. We do feel like some of these more random cards are incredibly exciting. So we are showing off a lot of those at BlizzCon. But the kind of the ratio of things we showed at BlizzCon, the limited number of cards we showed at BlizzCon is not indicative of exact mix of all the different various cards of type you'll encounter in Goblins versus Gnomes.
And because I was kind of expecting you to get the next expansion out for Christmas, partly because I thought like the company would want the money from all the people buying all the card packs as gifts for each other, but it also felt like kind of post-Nax the meta's really settled down now, and people you could even see at the decks that people brought to the championship today. There were a few tech tweaks, but largely they were kind of predictable in that there were big archetypes. Do you think this is the right sort of timeline you've got now between big content drops, and can we expect similar gaps between after Goblins versus Gnomes then to the next one? Is that kind of what you're committed to as a team?
We're still in the stage of learning. We released Curse of Naxxramas. Really, that was a big experiment for us in terms of how players would interact with single-player content, and also how much 30 cards could mix up the meta. And we have our answer now with tactically chosen 30 significant cards. We can really change the meta and mix things up, and that was awesome to see. Now we're introducing 120 new cards with Goblins versus Gnomes. We want to see what kind of effect that has in the game and the meta, and kind of understand kind of the length at which kind of meta will go into kind of an explosion after we release this content. So we're going to learn a lot going into 2015. After we kind of got this feedback and the data, I think we'll make decisions on what the right cadence is.
When you're testing a set of cards like this, you must have, like, I guess, a big group of internal people playing, really regularly with them. Mm-hmm. Does that form then its own metagame of those testers? And can you tell me a bit about what that's like?
Totally. Yeah. So we take balance really seriously. We have significantly increased our balance team size since we released Hearthstone. We've hired some of the collectible card game industry's most talented individuals. In fact, Mike Janae, who gave a talk earlier today about how to become an arena legend, he's just incredible to work with. So yeah, like what we start doing is we come up with a lot of interesting ideas. So first we come up with a theme that we're really excited about, and in this case it was kind of this eternal conflict between goblins and gnomes and all the wackiness that ensues. And once we have this idea, we start coming up with all these cool card ideas that would fit that theme. And then Ben Brode, Eric Dawes, and the rest of the balance team kind of start working together to make a tight set of 120 new cards. They really focus a lot on what are kind of the boundaries of what's possible, because what is true is that we can't anticipate 100% of what's going to happen, and we don't want to be able to anticipate 100% of what's happened. That would be boring. But what we do want to do is make sure that the boundary of what's possible is within the realm of what's going to be balanced and fun for everybody involved. So they do a lot of boundary testing. Like, what if I were to take this card idea and push it to the extreme? What if this card is really interesting with this other in a kind of in a synergy? Like, how far can I push that? And then they spend just a ton of time playtesting. And eventually, we involve the rest of the company. So we have company alphas. In fact, we had a internal tournament recently where the entire company, entire Blizzard Entertainment got together and played in a huge tournament. Sadly, didn't do so well this time around, but it was a fun experience.
So do they get given all the new cards to play with?
Yeah, when we have these tournaments, we're basically like, look, here are all the new cards. Just come up with the craziest, wackiest idea. And,
so are there people at Blizzard HQ sat on just these incredible decks that might redefine the meta that we just don't know about yet?
It's possible. I mean, we've got some really awesome new mechanics in Goblins versus Gnomes. A mech, piloted mech. That's all really interesting. Like we have a lot more sticky minions. That's going to create
quad wind fury.
We have quad wind fury, and
are there any other mechanics like that kind of quad? I'm trying to think of what an equivalent would be, but any other kind of multiplied versions of existing keywords?
No, but maybe like a new keyword. Not really a keyword, but a new mechanic that I personally find to be really interesting. I can talk about spare parts.
Yeah.
I find spare parts to be really interesting. I think I love ideas where you look at it and then you immediately have this like crazy dream that you want to try to fulfill. So, we talked a little bit about spare parts where you can play various cards, and either as a battle cry effect or death rattle effect, you can start accumulating these one-cost spells in your hand that does kind of these little tinker effects. But what immediately popped into my head was like, one-cost spell. Wait, so we have Archmage Antonidas already in the game. It's a legendary mage creature, and he gives you a fireball every time you cast a spell. Wait, you have Sorcerer's Apprentice that makes all your spells cost one less.
So what you're saying is you buffed Auctioneer again.
Well, I mean, so the dream in your head is like, oh wait, if I hoarded all my spare parts until I finally get Antonidas, who's like a super late game card, and then I play the Apprentice, and then I have all these zero cast cards, and I'm gonna spew them all out, and I'm gonna have a handful of fireballs, and I'm gonna win. Like that's the dream. Like I said, I didn't perform so well in the internal tournament.
I'll cross that idea right now.
But I'm sure there's like some less insane version of that out there that someone's going to come up with that's going to be balanced and super fun. So, that kind of dream to me is like really important, and the design team has done really a great job where you look at a lot of these cards and immediately your eyes are going to glimmer like you're one of those like mad goblins, and like, oh my god, I can do this, and you're going to go for it.
As one of the public-facing members of the team, you must get asked to nerf cards all the time, because that's what we as fans do to Blizzard. And like everyone knew, Leroy was on the kind of the watch list for ages. Are there cards that are on the watch list now that are kind of being debated, talked about, or you're worried about? Undertaker.
I can't talk about specifics, but I will say one thing. We take nerfing cards extremely seriously, and we really want players to understand why. It's not because we are, we're refusing to see something that's going on and out in the wild and trying to keep a blind eye on it. What's really important to us that Hearthstone is a living, breathing game. The destiny for which is determined by the community. Like, we want the meta to be a product of the creativity and hard work of the players, not this invisible hand of the designers. Like, we don't want players to be waiting around for us to kind of create a solution for them. We want them to go out there and find these solutions. And a lot of these cards that often players not complain, but express concerns about certain deck types. And what's really fascinating to me is just give it some time. Give it 3 weeks, give it 4 weeks. And some dude comes up with an alternate strategy that preys on this dominant deck, and then he flies to the top of the legend. And
you say that, but I saw Zoo was still on the word cloud of things people hate, and it was a pretty big word.
So we look at the stats very carefully and make sure things aren't out of control. But Eric Dodds, our game director, talks about this all the time. A game that is statistically perfect, that's perfect in data, is not the perfect game. So we do understand that if losses caused by certain deck types, or if there's a perception that certain deck is too dominant, it is very important for us to address it, because it's what he calls design by emotion. So honestly, a lot of times, we try to provide the community with a new tool to combat what's going on. I think LoFab is a good example of a card that we kind of put out there, so you can use it as a tool to maybe combat certain deck types that you are not happy playing against. But if kind of that emotional threshold exceeds a certain point, we do step in, and that's really, I think, one of the few times we actually go in and nerf cards, like with Leroy, where Bro had actually kind of gone through a bit of the thought process we went through. It's like, cards that are in your hand, cards that are when you're played, like in your hand win percentage, when you play win percentage. Leroy Jenkins was one of those cards where if you ever play it, high likelihood that you're going to win, because you only play it when you're about to win, right? So, people's emotion is that, oh my god, anytime I see Leroy, that dude wins. This card is OP. But what they don't see is the number of times these dudes are holding Leroy in their hand and they don't play it and they lose with Leroy in their hand. So, given that, so that's the reality of it, and that's the statistics of it. But emotionally, it's painful. Like, I am tired of getting killed by Leroy. So then we step in and make a change. But that's really the last resort. We really want to provide tools. And with Goblins versus Gnomes, we have over 120 new cards. I think we've already shown some really interesting new tools, like you mentioned Zoo. I would like to mention Explosive Sheep. We're really excited about kind of giving you these tools, and then just come up with some really awesome ways to pummel the crap out of the Zoo deck, and they'll be fun.
Can you talk me through the Blingtron 3000? Because I love the art of the card. Yes. I like the idea of it, but in practice, I've played a few games. It feels like a disaster to me. Like, I think I got one time I got Light's Justice, the other guy got Doomhammer.
Yeah.
And for his cost, he's like 5 for 3/4. When you compare him to like an Arahi Weaponsmith or something, he seems really undervalued. And I know there's this sort of suggestion, you could combo him with Harrison or a Slime, but that's pretty unlikely.
Well, again, I'm really excited about players kind of solving a lot of these puzzles themselves. But one thing I would like to say about Blingtron is, and maybe this is not the way that the kind of the matchup that's currently in BlizzCon Hall doesn't really show you the power of this, but I would if you were to play Blingtron and you were to ask me as a friend, it's like, oh, under what circumstance would you cast it? It's like, I would cast it around the same time I would either use an Acidic Swamp Ooze or an Harrison Jones. The idea is that, because the mechanic is that if you already have a weapon and then you get another weapon, the current weapon's destroyed. So
they might get a Gorehowl.
You could, but this is kind of when you weigh the pros and cons statistically, right? So statistically speaking, the weapon value should add up to about the same. So if, let's say, you kill this Tyrion and he's holding Ashbringer in his hand, you know that statistically you're going to come out way on top by playing Blingtron, where you both have a weapon, but he's now down an Ashbringer. So I think it's going to create some really... I'm actually personally really excited about Blingtron as an alternative way to combat weapon decks.
Okay. All these new cards, I asked this to Ben Brode and Jason Chase, I think, earlier in the year, and it caused a bit of a stink. Why can't we have more deck slots to make these exciting new decks? Or can we? Maybe you're going to tell me we can.
So this is something we've been talking about a lot as a team. It's not that we are, again, it's not that we're like ignoring feedback that's out there. We've been debating a lot about it. In some ways, it's a little bit like bag space in role-playing games. I think it's one of those things that no matter how much you have, you're going to always want more. And
I should warn you, he gave the bag space answer last time and it went down very badly on Reddit.
Oh, really? Well, let's not repost that then, thank you. But, that's... So I guess what I have to say is, look, we're kind of still in the same mind space, but we really understand that a lot of people feel really passionate about it. It's definitely something we're talking about actively within the team. We're not just ignoring you guys. But it's a tricky one. You just want players to understand that it's not... we haven't made up our minds, but it's really not a straightforward answer. There's a lot to consider here, and we're considering them.
Can you give a sense of how the class cards are going to change with the expansion? I think we've seen a couple of the Priest and Mage ones on the show floor here at BlizzCon. The Shrink Mice is really nice. Finding an answer for the Priest to the problem with the 4-attack minion.
Yeah.
But Priest seemed okay, like after Nax. I don't know if they needed it.
So I think the specifics of opinions and balance, I think someone like a balance designer would be better equipped to answer. But I am really excited about all the different class spells and minions we're adding. Especially, we're adding a special mech minion per class that's like really kind of flavored towards that class. Obviously, the priest one, you see that it's giving extra health, which is really interesting. We have some really awesome one for mage that I realize I shouldn't talk about right now, but it's going to be really cool. There's going to be a lot of class-specific mechs, a lot of class spells that are not related specifically to goblins and gnomes. Cards like Unstable Portal, Valence Chosen, we have at the floor, but it's really going to spice things up.
Do you think there are any cards from the old set that will suddenly see new life once the Goblins and Gnomes come out? Maybe Magma Rager, which was called the worst card in the game statistically.
Yes.
In Ben's chat.
So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because not only are we adding 120 plus new cards, what I'm really excited about is how that's going to make you go back to your old cellar and dust off some of these old cards that you haven't looked at in a while. A good example, and it's a little bit of a mind bender, is with Bouncing Blade. Basically, it spins around the board until a minion dies. But what's interesting to consider is how that combos with a card like Commanding Shout. So it's a warrior card. I believe it's 2 mana, draw a card, and for that turn, your minions cannot go below 1 health. So it's a card that's not being widely used in the current meta. I personally find it to be a very fascinating card. But now if you think about that in conjunction with Bouncing Blade, you realize that, oh my god, like if I have all these enraged minions, the blade can bounce all over the place, it's going to make sure they don't die, and I can do a lot of cool stuff. So I think cards like that, like I think like when 120 new cards out, I think people are going to go back and look at the 300 to 400 cards that are already out in the environment now and go like, oh my god, what other cool things can I do? And then when they dig up these old cards and start playing with them, like I think that's going to be wonderful.
It's a slightly strange metric, that one they use of like when this card is drawn, the percentage of you winning. Because I would have thought you would have used something like total damage dealt, or like number of times the card was on the board when lethal was administered. That would seem like more reflective of a card being part of a winning strategy?
We definitely look at statistics like that as well. I think Broad gave some, more easily digestible type of statistics for the purpose of his presentation. But we actually have really smart people working on our data intelligence team, and they do all sorts of amazing things, like kind of data clustering around different deck archetypes that exist there. Because it's not like everybody uses exactly the same deck, right? Kind of, so it requires a lot of kind of modeling to understand like what's the core of a warrior control deck and what are the different variants of it and how are each performing, which ones are better than others. So I'm actually really proud of how earlier on we kind of hooked up all this data gathering into our game and how effectively we're using it right now to make the game better. So things like you mentioned, a bunch of them are already being considered, and some of the stuff you mentioned, I'll actually think about it. That's actually really cool.
Yong, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Looking forward to playing more Goblins versus Gnomes, which is out this December.
Thank you.